my name is Pejman, so my email address is pejman@touca.io. This is our website. There is try Touca on GitHub with all our repositories. Little story here is that I was a software engineer for 5 years. I was working at a medical software company building a product for visualization of medical images. We had CT scan and MRI data sets. At the end of the day, there were a bunch of files of up to 20 gigabytes in size. And we wanted to visualize them in 3D and then make interactive objects for physicians to actually interact with the data set. So we had 6 million lines of code. And when I joined, I was assigned to a project to refactor 500,000 lines of code. Of course, with other people, but we were building a medical software. So it was very important for us to develop this, make our refactoring in a way that doesn't impact the overall software. So this was very challenging to me. So I started this side project. I worked on it for 3 years. But then because I was so obsessed with it, I started this startup called Touca. And now I basically left my job and I'm the founder of this startup. So what is Touca? Touca wants to give developers like I was a way to actually see the side effects of their code changes as they are writing code. The idea is instead of waiting after you push your code for someone else to test your code and say, oh, this is failing this particular test case, or you missed this corner case, which usually takes 23 days for engineers to get that feedback. We want to give real-time feedback to engineers. As imagine in your editor, you go start writing code, and then we are going to basically take your code changes, find relevant test cases to that piece of code change, and then run the tests for that, those test cases, and then give you the feedback in the code editor. What we've built now to do that, basically implement that vision, is what you see here on your screen. I've created a suite in the Touca cloud service, which is at app.touca.io. And here, the platform is giving me an API key and API URL that I can use to submit test results to it. Now, to implement that vision that I mentioned, the way that you make code changes and we immediately run your code, we need to fundamentally reconsider how people change their test their code. So here's a simple software. Imagine there is a parse profile function that takes a username of a student and then gives that a student. It just looks it up. It can be as complex as we want. And the implementation of it, because it's our production code, may change from one version to another. So here we don't want to, if you're very curious, this is right now just a map, and then we're basically looking up this dictionary and giving the student object. And then the student object that is returned has a username, full name, date of birth, and set of courses. Now, if we wanted to test this with unit testing, which is very popular and very effective, we would write something like this. We would say we're calling our function with a username, and then when we get the output, we are going to test for the different properties. And then we're listing the expected value for each output, right? It's very basic. I'm sure most of you know this. But the issue here, in my opinion, is if you want to test this function with so many hundreds and thousands of test cases, then describing this output is very difficult. The expected values for different fields is just going to be too much for us to code. And then hard coding all those test cases is also a hassle. So instead, we're taking a different approach. We are creating this tool called basically this Touca test. I'm importing the Touca package, and then I'm creating this workflow and saying, I'm just going to call this parse profile function with whatever test cases that I give. And what I care about is like these fields. I'm not specifying the inputs to my test. I'm not specifying what the expected values are. I'm just saying, here's a version of my code, and here's how I want to test it. So what I did was I copied this API key and API variable, API URL. I exported them as environment variables, so I don't have to specify them on the command line. And now I'm just going to run my test. I'm just going to give this test case file and say, hey, use these three as usernames of the students. And so revision 1, I'm just going to run it. And you see that the test, so basically the test framework is going to pass these test cases one by one to my software, and it's just going to submit it to the platform. Now, if I go click on version 1 here, I see information about those test cases that I've submitted here. You see that they're shown with a spin-in icon because they're being compared right now. In fact, I can click on them and see that once they're compared, the values for each version. Now, if I go and make changes to my implementation, of course, I can go back and then see the differences. The platform compares all the differences and then show them in real time. So the idea is for this kind of test framework to be so flexible in terms of the test cases that it gives you a way of, running them with as many test cases as you like. Now, because I have so little time, I'm just going to show you a bunch of test cases that I've already submitted for different versions of that same software. Now you see that they are shown with different icons to say that, hey, this version 5 that I've submitted has some differences against version 2, which is shown with the star. So if I can click on it, I'll see, what test case was different. I can click on that to see all the variables that were submitted. I see that in addition to the variables that describe the behavior of my software, I can actually see the performance of different functions of that code under test. Here, the platform is automatically comparing that performance against version 2, which you see here. I can actually compare, basically change this so that I can compare version 5 with some other version if I like. Now, imagine that I make all these basically inspections, and I determine that version 5, even though it's different, it's actually the way that I expect it to work. That from now on, I like the software to work as of version 5. So I can just go ahead and promote this. I can even write a message to my colleagues and explain why I think this is the right choice. And then once I click promote, the software automatically starts comparing version 5 against basically the new baseline, which happens to be itself. And then it sends this email to all the software engineers in my team that I've promoted this version. So the idea is for you to have a way of tracking the changes in your the behavior of your software. And of course, you can integrate this with GitHub Actions or other CI to make this completely continuous and automated. There's so much more to Touca. I ran out of time. So thank you so much for listening to this talk. And again, if you have any questions, if you have criticism over the way that you're approaching software testing, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you.